The last thing my father ever said to me before I walked out of the house was, "You'll come crawling back when your little business fails." My mother laughed. My older brother shook his head. Even my aunt smiled and whispered, "He's just wasting everyone's time." To them, I wasn't the smart kid anymore. I wasn't the son they were proud of. I was the failed investment. The child they claimed had wasted 4 years of college, thousands of dollars, and every opportunity they'd ever given me for 3 years. Not one person in my family asked how I was doing. Not one birthday call. Not one holiday invitation. Nothing. Then one sunny Saturday afternoon, they were driving through downtown, on their way to a family barbecue. Traffic came to a stop. My father looked up. His hand slowly slipped off the steering wheel. My mother covered her mouth. My brother whispered, "No way." Towering above the entire neighborhood was a massive digital billboard. It displayed my company's logo, my face, and 6 words they never thought they'd see. Built from nothing. Trusted nationwide. That was the day. My family realized the son they called a failure had built something far bigger than any of them had ever imagined, but by then it was already too late. If you enjoy emotional family stories about betrayal, perseverance, success, and powerful life lessons, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every week, we bring unforgettable stories that prove your greatest success often begins where others stop believing in you. Now, let me tell you how the family that laughed at my dream ended up staring at my success from a traffic light. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 28 years old. And 5 years ago, I owned exactly 3 things: a second-hand laptop, a backpack full of clothes, and a dream everyone else believed would fail. Growing up, success had only one definition in my family: become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Anything else was considered irresponsible. My father, Richard Carter, worked as an accountant for nearly 30 years. Everything in his life revolved around stability, predictability, safety. He believed risks were for reckless people, dreams were expensive hobbies. My mother, Linda, never openly criticized me. She didn't have to. Her disappointment spoke louder than words. Every time relatives visited, she proudly introduced my older brother, Michael, our future attorney. Then she'd point toward me. "Ethan's still figuring things out." Everyone would laugh. I'd smile, pretending it didn't hurt. The truth was, I already knew what I wanted. Ever since high school, I'd been obsessed with technology. Not games, not social media. Building things, creating software, finding solutions to problems people didn't even realize they had. While my classmates were partying, I spent weekends teaching myself how to code. Every successful project made me more certain. This wasn't a hobby. It was my future. After college, I received an offer from one of the biggest software companies in Chicago. Excellent salary, health insurance, bonuses. Exactly the kind of job my parents dreamed about. There was only one problem. Accepting it meant abandoning the startup I'd secretly been building for almost 2 years. The night I told my parents, everything changed. We were sitting around the dinner table. I cleared my throat. "I've decided not to accept the corporate job." Silence. My father slowly lowered his fork. "What did you just say?" "I'm starting my own company." My brother actually laughed. "You mean playing with apps?" "It's a software platform. It helps small businesses manage," Dad interrupted. "So you're throwing away a guaranteed career for a fantasy?" "I've already found my first clients." "How many?" 3. Michael burst into laughter. 3? Dad has more clients than that before lunch. Mom quietly added, "Ethan, you've always been smart. Don't ruin your future." "I won't. I'm building something bigger." Dad leaned back. "You know what your problem is? You think you're special." "No, I think I'm willing to work harder." His face hardened. "You'll regret this." For the next several weeks, dinner conversations became unbearable. Every meal ended the same way. "So, how's the imaginary company? Have you made your first million yet? When are you getting a real job?" At first, I laughed with them. Eventually, I stopped eating dinner downstairs. 3 months later, the pressure exploded. Dad walked into my room carrying a folder. Inside were job applications. "I've already scheduled 3 interviews. I'm not going. You don't have a choice. I'm 23. I've made my decision." His voice became louder. "Then make it somewhere else." The room went completely silent. Mom looked away. Michael didn't say a word. I realized no one was going to defend me. That night, I packed one backpack, my laptop, a few clothes, 2 notebooks filled with business ideas, and exactly $412. I stopped in the hallway. Dad never looked up from the television. As I reached the front door, he calmly said, "You'll be back when you realize failure isn't a business model." I quietly answered, "Maybe, but if I come back, it won't be because I failed." Then, I walked out. The first apartment I rented was barely bigger than a garage. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The heater only worked half the time. The kitchen sink constantly dripped. But every morning, I woke up excited. Because for the first time, every hour I worked was building my future, not someone else's. Money disappeared quickly. There were weeks I survived on instant noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and coffee, lots of coffee. Some nights, I slept in my office chair because I couldn't afford enough heat. Other nights, I questioned everything. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I was chasing a dream too big to catch. But every time doubt appeared, I'd open my notebook. At the very top of the first page, I'd written one sentence: build the life they said was impossible. 6 months later, my first major client canceled. Without warning, nearly 70% of my income disappeared overnight. I stared at my bank account. There wasn't enough money to pay rent and keep the company alive. I had to choose. I paid the company bills and spent the next 2 weeks sleeping inside my tiny office. I never told anyone, especially not my family, because failure was exactly what they were waiting to hear. Then one rainy evening, as I sat alone, wondering if I should finally give up, my phone rang. It wasn't a client, it wasn't a friend, it was my mother, for the first time in almost 7 months. I answered immediately. Her first question wasn't, "How are you?" It wasn't, "Do you need anything?" Instead, she quietly asked, "So, are you finally ready to admit your father was right?" I closed my eyes, because in that moment, I realized they hadn't called because they missed me. They called to see if I had finally become the failure they always expected. My mother's phone call should have hurt me. Instead, it gave me clarity. They weren't waiting for me to succeed. They were waiting for me to fail. So I smiled, hung up the phone, and went back to work. Because proving people wrong never happens through arguments. It happens through results. The next morning, I walked into my tiny office, one broken desk, one old laptop, 2 folding chairs, and a coffee machine that barely worked. That was my company. No investors, no wealthy relatives, no safety net, just me. I opened my inbox, 43 unanswered emails, most of them were rejection letters. We've decided to move in another direction. Your company is too small. Maybe next year. Every rejection looked the same. Every one made me work harder. 3 weeks later, my landlord knocked on my office door. "Ethan, I've waited as long as I can. I know. Rent's due tomorrow. I'll have it." He looked around the empty office. "You really believe this company's going to work?" I smiled. "I have to." He nodded quietly. "I hope you're right." So did I. That Friday, my bank account dropped below $100. I bought the cheapest instant noodles I could find. As I stood in line, the cashier recognized me. "Didn't you graduate with Michael Carter?" "Yeah. I heard your brother's doing really well." "He is. What about you?" I smiled politely. "I'm working on something." She nodded, the way people do when they secretly feel sorry for you. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, my name had become a joke. According to my cousin later, every family dinner sounded the same. My father would raise his glass and laugh. "Here's to Ethan, our future billionaire." Everyone laughed. My uncle added, "Maybe next Christmas he'll invent an app that pays his rent." More laughter. Even my mother smiled. Not because she hated me, because she'd already accepted that I had failed. One Sunday my aunt called, "Ethan, we're having Grandma's birthday dinner." "I'd love to come." There was a pause. Then she quietly said, "Your father thinks it might be better if you don't." I stayed silent. "He doesn't want family asking questions about your business." I looked out the window. "I understand." "No," she whispered. "I don't think you do." That night I sat alone eating takeout noodles, while somewhere across town, my entire family celebrated together. Without me. A few days later, something unexpected happened. A small hardware store owner named Mr. Alvarez called. "I heard about your software. I'd like a demonstration." I almost dropped my phone. He wasn't a huge client, but he was willing to listen. For 2 hours, I showed him every feature: inventory tracking, payroll, customer management. When I finished, he smiled. "You built all this yourself?" "I did." He extended his hand. "I'll take it." That single handshake kept my company alive. Mr. Alvarez didn't just become a client, he became my biggest supporter. Whenever another business owner complained about outdated software, he gave them my number. Word spread. Slowly, then faster. Within 6 months, 3 clients became 15. 40 became over 100. I was growing. I hired my first employee. Her name was Maya, fresh out of college, brilliant, ambitious. She walked into my tiny office, looked around, and laughed. "So, this is headquarters," I grinned. "For now." She smiled. "I like impossible projects." "So do I." Together, we worked 16-hour days, sometimes longer. Pizza boxes filled the office. Whiteboards covered every wall. Mistakes happened. Servers crashed. Software broke. Clients complained. We fixed everything. Every single time. 1 year later, a regional business magazine published an article. Chicago startup helping small businesses compete with major corporations. For the first time, people outside my tiny office knew my company's name. That same week, my phone rang. Dad. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly 18 months. I answered. "Ethan." "Hi, Dad. I saw something about your company." "Yeah." There was a long silence. Then, "Don't let one lucky article go to your head," I smiled. "It wasn't luck." He ignored that. "When are you getting a real job?" I looked around my office, where 12 employees were solving problems together. "I already have one." He laughed. "No, you have a hobby." Then he hung up. For the first time, his words didn't hurt, because I no longer needed his approval. Success had become my answer. Over the next 2 years, everything changed. We expanded into 3 states, then 8, then nationwide. We moved into a modern headquarters overlooking downtown Chicago. The tiny folding chairs disappeared, the leaking ceiling disappeared, the instant noodles disappeared. But one thing never changed. The notebook, every new office, every new desk, it stayed beside my computer, still open to the first page, build the life they said was impossible. Then came the biggest opportunity of my life. A national marketing agency contacted us. "We'd like your company to become the face of our small business success campaign." I almost thought it was spam, until they invited me to their office. The campaign would appear across television, online, and digital billboards throughout Illinois. The largest billboard would stand beside the highway, less than 5 minutes from my parents' neighborhood. I laughed when I saw the location. Life had a strange sense of humor. A month later, the campaign launched. Our company logo filled giant LED screens. My face appeared beside the slogan, "Built from nothing, trusted nationwide." Employees cheered. Clients celebrated. News stations covered the campaign. I was grateful. But I never called my family. If they wanted to know, they'd find out on their own. The following Saturday, my parents were driving to my cousin's barbecue. Michael sat in the passenger seat. Mom was in the back. Traffic slowed near the highway exit. Then, everything stopped. Dad looked out the windshield. His expression froze. Michael frowned. "What is everyone looking at?" Mom followed his gaze. Her hand flew to her mouth. Towering above the entire neighborhood, brighter than every other advertisement, was a massive digital billboard. My company, my face, my name, and the words they had laughed at for years. "Built from nothing, trusted nationwide." No one in the car spoke, because at that exact moment, the son they had always called their biggest failure had become impossible to ignore. The traffic light turned green. Cars slowly began moving again. But my family's car didn't. My father kept staring through the windshield at the giant digital billboard, my face, my company's logo, and the 6 words he'd spent years insisting would never become reality. Built from nothing, trusted nationwide. For the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. My brother Michael broke the silence. "This has to be fake," Mom quietly whispered. "It isn't." She recognized the suit I was wearing, the one she'd seen in a business magazine weeks earlier. Dad gripped the steering wheel tighter. "No, there has to be an explanation," but there wasn't. The explanation was 5 years of sleepless nights. 5 years of rejection, 5 years of believing in myself when no one else did. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. I ignored the first call, then the second, then the third. By evening, I had 21 missed calls, every single one from family. People who hadn't remembered my birthday suddenly remembered my phone number. The first voicemail came from my aunt. "Ethan, I just saw the billboard. We're all so proud of you." I smiled sadly. Proud? 5 years ago, the same aunt had asked me when I was planning to get a real career. Then came my uncle. "You always were the smartest one." Funny, he'd once called my company a child's fantasy. Finally, my mother's voicemail. "Ethan, please call us. We need to talk." Not, "How are you?" Not, "We miss you." Just, "We need to talk." I didn't call back, not because I hated them, because for the first time, my peace mattered more than their opinions. Monday morning, I arrived at company headquarters. The lobby buzzed with excitement. Employees were taking photos in front of the campaign display. Maya walked over smiling. "Ethan, you've got visitors." I frowned. "I don't have any meetings." "You do now." I walked into the conference room. My parents were sitting there, along with Michael. No one spoke. The room felt strangely familiar, like those uncomfortable dinners years ago. Except this time, everything had changed. Dad stood first. "You've done well." I smiled politely. "Thank you." Another silence. Finally, he asked, "So, how much is the company worth?" I almost laughed. That was his first question. Not, "How have you been?" Not, "I'm sorry, just money." "I don't discuss company finances." His eyebrows tightened. "We're family." I quietly replied, "Were we?" The room became silent. Mom began crying. "Ethan, we made mistakes." I nodded. "You did." "We were trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to control me." She looked down, unable to deny it. Michael finally spoke. "I'll admit, I underestimated you." I smiled. "You laughed at me." He looked embarrassed. "I know, I was wrong." Dad slowly sat back down. "I only wanted stability for you. I know. But stability without happiness is just another prison." He stared at the table. For the first time, he listened instead of arguing. I opened a drawer, pulled out something I'd kept for years, a worn notebook, the same notebook I'd carried from my tiny apartment to my first office to this building. I slid it across the table. Dad opened it. The first page read, "Build the life they said was impossible." Below it were dozens of handwritten dates, failed pitches, rejected proposals, canceled contracts, late rent notices, every setback, every obstacle, every victory. Mom gently touched one page. There was a coffee stain across the corner. I smiled. That was dinner. Michael looked confused. "Dinner? I couldn't afford food that week." No one spoke. I continued quietly. "You all thought success happened overnight. It didn't. It happened one rejection at a time. It happened every night I wanted to quit. It happened every morning I decided not to." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know. You never asked." Those 3 words hit harder than any argument ever could. For several minutes, nobody moved. Finally, Dad stood, walked around the table, and did something he'd never done before. He hugged me. Not because I was successful, because he finally realized how much he'd lost. "I'm sorry, son," his voice shook. "I spent so much time trying to make you become who I wanted. I never appreciated who you already were." I hugged him back, but something inside me had changed. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let the past control the future. Over the following months, our relationship slowly improved. Mom started calling every Sunday, not to ask about money, just to ask how I was doing. Dad never criticized another dream again. Whenever neighbors asked about my company, he didn't brag. He simply smiled and said, "I'm proud of my son." Those words meant more than the Billboard ever could. Michael surprised everyone. He left the law firm he'd never truly loved, started his own business. One evening he admitted, "I spent years living Dad's dream. You had the courage to live yours." For the first time. We weren't competitors. We were brothers again. 1 year later, the Billboard campaign ended. Another company bought the advertising space. My face disappeared from the skyline. But something far more important remained: respect. Not because of the Billboard, not because of money, because I'd proven that success isn't measured by someone else's expectations. It's measured by becoming the person you refused to stop believing in. Several months later, my company hosted its annual leadership conference. Hundreds of entrepreneurs attended. At the end of my keynote speech, a young man approached me. "I wanted to quit my startup." He smiled. "Then I heard your story. I'm going home. To keep building." I shook his hand, because I saw myself in him 5 years earlier, scared, uncertain, hopeful. Ending people will often call your dreams unrealistic, simply because they don't have the courage to chase their own. My family called me their biggest failure, not because I'd failed, because my success didn't fit their definition of success. The Billboard didn't change who I was. It only revealed how wrong they had been all along. Never let someone else's fear become the limit on your future. Keep building, keep believing. And one day, the people who doubted you may find themselves looking up at the life they insisted you could never create. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's working toward a dream that others don't yet understand. And remember, the greatest success isn't proving your critics wrong, it's proving yourself right. The end.